Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post. Woke lunatics panic as Disney investigated for illegal diversity policies by FCC. Now it's starting to get real. They knew they were pushing their luck with DEI nonsense in Hollywood, but now with the federal government under a new administration, they're in serious trouble. From Forbes, the FCC is investigating Disney's DEI. Is this a danger to creative brands? Yeah, this is a pretty serious danger to everybody that's been breaking the law to give work and opportunities to people that look like them instead of people who are qualified to have that work and those opportunities. Here's from a recent interview. FCC chairman says probe into Disney's DEI discrimination could cost ABC its broadcast license. Disney owns ABC, and they need the permission of the FCC to operate. It's an endorsement when you get a license from the federal government to operate. You have to meet certain standards to operate under any licensed opportunity, whether it's with the state or the federal government, whatever the profession is. But you can't operate under government airwaves like they do at ABC and be constantly breaking the law in the use of those airwaves and that entire operation. This is serious and it goes beyond Disney. This is not just criticism. What constitutes DEI in a creative space? Which is to say, if we're working creatively, can't we just say and do whatever we want? Can't we just hire whomever we want? Can't we just produce whatever kind of work that we want? Can't we exclude whomever we choose to exclude? The answer to that is, for the most part, no, you actually can't do that. They continue. Chances are we'll soon find out, and the implications could ripple across the creator landscape. This is much bigger than just Disney. Disney just happens to be a major target right now. In a letter addressed last week to Disney CEO Bob Iger, the FCC chairman Brendan Carr wrote that the FCC's Enforcement Bureau will be opening an investigation into Disney and ABC over their diversity, equity, and inclusion practices, saying the FCC was, quote, concerned that their DEI practices may violate FCC prohibitions on invidious forms of discrimination. Even if you hate certain races or certain sexual preferences, you can't discriminate against them in the normal course of business, and particularly not operating in good faith under licenses provided by the federal government. While the investigation is framed as a compliance issue, it underscores the broader implications of President Trump's executive orders targeting DEI initiatives and the potential consequences for the creative industry. Mainly, what exactly is DEI when dealing with companies who create content? This is something that Disney and Sony both tried to do to avoid responsibility in a lawsuit for refusing to hire white people or for viewpoint discrimination like in the Gina Carano lawsuit. They tried to say in their filings, hey, look, this is First Amendment activity. We can hire whoever we want to hire when we're doing something related to creative expression. If we don't like your political point of view, we don't have to hire you. If we don't like your skin color, because we want a point of view of people who have a different skin color, that's up to us. You don't get to say anything about that. But that's not really accurate. It's not really true, and it's being tested in the courts. And to try to hide behind the First Amendment when it comes to discriminating against people, against their immutable characteristics, is not only disgusting, I don't think it's ever worked before. It's not going to be working now. That's also with respect to civil protections if you're being sued in court for bad things that you did, like Disney did do and Sony did do. That's not going to give you permission to discriminate against people and then get the granted extra benefit of having a broadcast license and an endorsement from the federal government to operate a news station or to operate an entertainment station. The licensing for ABC is different than the licensing for their cable channels or for their streaming service. ABC's license gives them access to the people's airwaves. That's our airwaves. We own that. They don't own it. They just get to use it, and they can't be breaking the law when they're using it. They go on. And what does this mean for the future of diverse programming? What this means for the future of diverse programming is that focusing only on diverse programming and excluding people who are qualified from even consideration when you're hiring people for things is not going to be acceptable anymore. Not just because of the FCC. There's been a massive backlash against this at every level. Consumers don't like it. Talent doesn't like it. It doesn't make good returns on investment. It's not what people wanted. It's not what people were willing to pay for. And if you're making things and doing things that people are not willing to pay for and you're actually in business, that don't work. Disney is iconic with a century-long legacy of creative and innovative storytelling. It owns a vast portfolio of assets, from theme parks, resorts, and studios to media and streaming services like ESPN, ABC, Hulu, Pixar, Marvel, and Lucasfilm. And Disney is at the center of another political and cultural battle. The FCC will investigate Disney's mandatory inclusion standards at ABC, which required 50% of regular and recurring characters to be drawn from underrepresented groups. Quote, these standards may have forced racial and identity quotas into every level of production, demanding that 50% or more of writers, directors, crew, and vendors be selected based on group identity, according to Carr in his letter to Bob Iger. I do think it makes a difference when you say, look, we want to have a certain percentage of characters in our animation, on our TV shows, in our live action movies, whatever the format. That percentage of characters, we want this percent to be white, and this percent to be black, and that percent to be Asian, and these percents to be transgender, or whatever they come up with next. If you're talking about the final product of the creative content, they may have some freedom with that. And I think that's why Carr structured his letter the way he did. You can't, though, say that you don't want to have white people or Asian people or straight people working on producing that content. Even though you could make an argument and say, look, if I'm white or black or Jewish or Christian, maybe I have a different perspective on producing that kind of content. You can't do that. You can't reverse engineer out of what the editorial product is special permission to discriminate against people in the workplace. That's a real no-no. The FCC also pointed at Disney's use of racially segregated affinity groups and spaces for its staff. Despite Disney scaling back some DEI initiatives earlier this year in response to the administration's executive order, Carr said that significant concerns remain. Disney has responded cautiously, stating it is reviewing the FCC's letter and looks forward to engaging with the commission. That was the right response from Disney. Have respect for the FCC, because they get to decide whether or not you have broadcast licenses. The FCC's investigation into Disney is not the only one. It follows a similar probe into Comcast earlier this year and reflects the administration's broader campaign to eliminate DEI initiatives in federal agencies and discourage their use in private companies. Recently, Disney shareholders widely rejected a recent anti-DEI proposal in their latest meeting. And that's fine. Let's say all the Disney shareholders decide they want to have DEI programs. They can do that. And let's say all the voting was legitimate, no problem. They can't also have broadcast licenses, though, so they're going to lose those. It's not all up to shareholders. It's not all up to Disney. The federal government has control over these licenses, and the federal government sets these standards. In response to the current political climate, Disney issued a memo in February stating it would align its initiatives more closely with business goals and company values. Well, that's nice. It's probably a good idea to take your business projects and your initiatives and tie them in with a business goal, like because you are in business for a specific reason. Let's do that sometimes. This investigation into Disney highlights the consequences of the anti-DEI stance, particularly for creative companies. Storytelling, by its very nature, thrives on diversity. No, it actually thrives on well-written stories and well-considered content. And diversity can be a part of that. But the traditional definition of diversity, stories from different characters' points of view, stories that are universal, that appeal to everybody regardless of their skin color. Mandatory inclusion standards, they say, such as those implemented at ABC, are not just about meeting quotas, they're about reflecting the world as it is and creating content that resonates with a broad audience. Well, let's just hope Disney is not foolish enough to put anything in writing that says they're meeting quotas at ABC based on race. You can't actually do that legally. That is just black and white, completely illegal. The woke lunatics worry, though, that by targeting these policies, there's a risk the FCC could stifle creativity and limit the stories that can be told. At ABC? At ABC News, for example? I don't think so. Since Trump's executive orders were announced, no clear definition of the term DEI has been established. And what the term encompasses is at the discretion of the office or the identified lead at the company or government agency. DEI is clearly all the nonsense they've been doing these last few years to try to push a race-obsessed agenda. We know what it is. They know what it is. They're being held accountable for it, and there's no getting out of this one. And here's where they pretend like a child to not know what it's all about. They ask, will Black and Hispanic or Latino content be classified under DEI and thus need to be removed to align with the mandates, policies, programs, preferences, and activities in the federal government? Moreover, what message does this send to other creative companies? If Disney, a powerhouse in the entertainment industry, can be scrutinized for its DEI practices, smaller companies may feel pressured to abandon their own diversity initiatives to avoid similar scrutiny, which of course the smaller companies are already doing because they're all terrified of being held accountable for the horrible things that they've already done. This could lead to a homogenization of content where underrepresented voices are sidelined in favor of so-called safer narratives that align with the administration's vision. No one's concerned about the narratives in cartoon shows. No one's concerned about the narratives in Star Wars, except you guys. Everyone knows what they expect from brands. Brands should be consistent with what their identity is, what people expect from the brands. A brand is a promise. When you break that promise, then you got problems. Until that point, there are no problems. But no, you can't just hijack brands for political reasons and claim it's for diversity. Not anymore. Now let's consider the ethical and the economic implications. DEI initiatives are not just about representation. They're about creating equitable opportunities for all employees, regardless of race, gender, or background. We have to discriminate against certain people who are qualified. Otherwise, everyone doesn't get the same equal opportunity. They literally say things like this, and they think it makes sense. It does not. It's just racist. Framing these policies as discriminatory could undermine decades of progress in workplace equity. From an economic perspective, diversity is a proven driver of innovation and profitability. No, it is not. With America's demographics evolving, including these new, exciting voices allows companies to overcome what has become a historic $6 trillion blind spot with these consumers. They love to pull numbers out of the air and say things like, well, in 30 years, don't you realize that there's going to be a white minority in this country? You've got to start making Star Wars movies that make no sense. And you've got to start doing that right now. Same thing with Marvel. Same thing with every animated project, every branded project. You've got to change your brands to reflect the future in what might be 20, 30, 40 years from now, if that ever happens. And then they come up with ideas that, well, look, if we had just done more projects that nobody actually wants, then we're going to get additional sales and make all this money, which they actually tried to do, and they proved it does not work. And in case you weren't sure of the numbers, it's estimated that Black Americans' spending power sits at between $1.4 trillion and $1.8 trillion annually, a powerful economic bloc that's comparable to the gross domestic products of Mexico, Canada, and Italy. Latinos' purchasing power in the U.S. reached $3.4 trillion in 2021 and grew more than 2 times faster than non-Latino groups. Asian Americans with $1.3 trillion in buying power, who are always discriminated against when it comes to DEI, have a median household income of $104,000, well above the average income in the U.S. Oh, they're afraid to say white people? Sure, you can say it, white people. There are hardworking people who are Asian, who are white, who are black, who have different sexual preferences than I do. All of that adds up to nothing. They don't want content that's just made exclusively for their niche, especially not at the exclusion of other things that people actually want. They then go on to claim that studies constantly show that companies with diverse teams outperform their less diverse counterparts. Completely absurd and not true. For creative companies, this is particularly true. No, it is not. Competent people, regardless of their race or sexual preferences, always outperform people that are not competent. And a weak link on a chain is the same as a weak link on a team. If the person isn't qualified, their skin color isn't going to make up for it, and they're going to drag down the entire team. I'm sorry to say, people do need to be qualified. They also hilariously claim a diverse workforce brings a wealth of perspectives and experiences that can lead to more compelling and relatable content. No, it doesn't. Targeting DEI initiatives will have a ripple effect on the industry, all of Hollywood, discouraging companies from investing in diversity and ultimately impacting their bottom line. For the better, they'll make more money because diversity doesn't sell. What the consumer wants sells, which is not necessarily white people or Asian people. It's good content. The question is not whether DEI policies will survive, but whether the creative industry can continue to thrive without them. Hollywood has not been doing so well as they've focused on this diversity stuff over the last few years. Yet they claim it's doing well because when they say thrive, they mean people have been given opportunities they were never qualified to have. They produced a lot of things. They made a bunch of money. No one watched it, but at least people got the jobs and they got to earn money they didn't deserve. And somehow that's thriving, but it's not thriving because, as this has shown, if you're in the business of making things and you make things that people do not want, whatever you're doing will ultimately fail. The FCC chairman is not playing around. And here's where he makes the threat. They ask him in an interview, quote, "Is this about Disney's hiring practices or is it about something else?" He responds, "This is about the hiring practices and their employment practices. Look, broadcasters, and Disney owns one, have an obligation under federal law. We have EEO rules. Those are equal opportunity employment rules at the FCC, which means you can't make hiring decisions based on protected characteristics, including gender and race," he explained. And the evidence we have so far indicates potentially that Disney and ABC were making employment decisions based on race and gender, including having effectively race-based affinity groups within the company, which a lot of companies have done and have since stopped. He continues, "We have evidence that they put quotas in place based on specific demographics. If the evidence does in fact play out and shows that they were engaged in race and gender-based discrimination, that's a very serious issue at the FCC that could fundamentally go to their character qualifications to even hold a license. But we're going to follow the facts wherever they go. This is not a game. This is not a threatening letter. This is for real. And the people who are looking into Disney and the other people who are breaking the law are deadly serious about correcting this. They understand what the stakes are. They're not going to let these people poison the culture anymore or ruin people's careers just based on their race. There's a new sheriff in town, and this nonsense is going to stop." Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.